Hi, I'm Marty Kelsey, one of the hosts of STEM in 30, an Emmy-nominated TV show produced by the National Air and Space Museum. And welcome to the Air and Space Live Chat. We have got a great show for you today. Last week, we released a new episode of STEM in 30 all about Mars. And 1 week from today, NASA is landing the Perseverance rover on the red planet, and we can't wait. Today, we have a great guest for you to talk about Mars exploration. Abigail Harrison is an aspiring astronaut, co-founder of the Mars Generation, and brand new author. You may know her better as Astronaut Abby. Abby, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be back with STEM in 30.
All right, well, before we get started, I want to remind everybody watching, let us know where you're watching from. Put those locations down in the comments section. If you're watching from a school, let us know that, and we'll give as many shout outs as we can. Also, whatever questions you have for Abby, put them down in the comments section, and we will get to as many of them as we can, and bonus points if you stump her. We've already talked about that today. We would love that. So Abby, for our viewers that may not know your story, let's start out. Tell us a little bit about your quest to become an astronaut.
Yeah, so I've been dreaming of space my entire life, ever since I was probably about 3 or 4 years old. That's my earliest memory of wanting to become an astronaut and wanting to go to space. And I was just really inspired by the natural world around me, by stargazing, by astronomy. And I decided then and there at that really early age that I was going to be a part of this. I was going to be an astronaut and explore space and find the answers to some of these questions that are still outstanding. And so I've been doing that ever since. I'm 23 years old now, so I've been chasing after this out of this world dream for about 2 decades now. And during that time, I've had the opportunity to become a pilot, to co-found a nonprofit, to study Russian and Mandarin Chinese to facilitate to facilitate future potential international communication. I have been an educator in astronomy. I've gotten to drive test buggies for the Martian landscape. I'm an advanced scuba diver. I've done skydiving. I'm trying to think what else. I've done field research in Siberia. I've worked in a NASA-funded astrobiology lab, and now I am working at Harvard Medical School as a scientific researcher. Got to take a breath after all of that.
Abby, why is it that you're doing so many diverse, different things?
Well, part of it is that in order to add to my resume for when I do apply to become an astronaut, because right now I'm not an astronaut yet, even though I've got the spiffy jumpsuit, I'm an aspiring astronaut. And I'm really what I'm doing right now and what I've been focusing on for years now, and will for a couple more years, is adding to this resume, building this really incredible, really well-rounded resume so that when I apply, I have skills that are applicable for every situation that might be needed or that might be attractive for the astronaut selection program. That's part of it. The other part is that I'm a very naturally curious person, and I'm just kind of going where the journey takes me, and I've gotten to have a lot of these incredible opportunities along the way.
That is awesome. Well, we've got folks tuning in from the Ukraine, Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, South Carolina, Virginia, North Carolina, California, Missouri, Lavernia Junior High in Texas, Watson Conley Elementary School, and a 7th grade class from Collier Elementary in Avondale, Arizona. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Let us know what questions you have for Abby down in the comments section. We want to get to as many of them as possible. Abby, I've got a question for you. We've got a landing coming up on Mars in about a week, a week and 3 or 4 hours from now. How excited are you about that landing?
I am over the moon, or over Mars, I guess, excited about that landing. Something that I didn't mention when I was giving my intro and talking a little bit about my journey and my career path is that not only do I want to become an astronaut, but I also want to be the first astronaut to walk on Mars. And that means that I am so excited. I know there are a lot of people who are really excited about this Perseverance landing on the 18th, but I'm especially excited because one of the main features and reasons for Perseverance is to explore further, to find, to look for potential evidence of life, past life on the surface of Mars, which my research in the past was in astrobiology, and to support and to provide more information for potential future rovers and landers and human missions, which for someone like me, there couldn't be anything more exciting than laying the groundwork for hopefully me walking on the surface of Mars in the future.
Awesome. We've got Ohio, India, Missouri, Utah, also Indian Harbor Beach, Florida. Fifth grade at Sunlight Christian Academy in Port St. Lucie, Florida. Mascot or Muscogee Elementary, C.J. Jorgensen Elementary School, and Lassen Elementary. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. Let us know what questions you have down in the comments section. Abby, somebody wants to know, was it fun to test drive the buggies?
Yeah, it was really fun. That was one of those experiences where it was as cool as it looks. Like the pictures and videos of that look cool, and I can guarantee you that it was as cool as it looks. Lots of fun.
All right, somebody wants to know, what's the biggest challenge in getting humans to live on Mars?
There's a lot of challenges. I would say that one of the biggest challenges that we're facing right now is actually radiation. Radiation is a huge issue for Mars, particularly because Mars doesn't have a magnetic field the way that Earth does. Earth's magnetic field, whether or not you know it, is protecting you all the time from harmful radiation that comes not just from within our own solar system, but from all over, from unknown sources at unknown distances throughout the entire universe, and travels for a long time, and eventually sometimes collides with things in our solar system. And so it's really dangerous to have all that radiation out there. Earth protects us pretty well from it. Unhappily, Mars doesn't have that same protection, and that really is not just for the journey to Mars, but for potentially putting people on the surface of Mars for long periods of time in the future. That's a huge issue.
All right, we've got literally viewers from around the world: Iraq, Costa Rica, Italy, Malaysia, and then here in the United States, Texas, Georgia, New York, Missouri, and then Canada as well as Mrs. Alvarado's third grade class. Thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate it.
That is a great international list. That's exciting. Thank you all.
Doing these live chats, we've actually had a chance to connect with people from all 50 states. So please let us know where you're watching from, because it's always fun for us to go back later and look at all of the places that people were viewers from.
Especially if there's anyone watching, sorry to interrupt you there, Marty, I have to give a shout out. If there's anyone watching from Minnesota, that's where I'm from. Oh yeah, you betcha. So make sure to mention that.
Yep, so Minnesota, give those shout outs and down in the comments section, let us know where you're watching from. A fourth grade homeschooler from Texas is watching, and they want to know, how hot can Mars get?
Yeah, that's a great question, because a lot of times we talk about Mars as this place that's super inhospitable to life and really difficult for anything to survive on. And in most cases, that's true. Mars has a lot of detrimental factors to it. It has a really low atmosphere, about 1% of Earth's atmosphere. It has 1/3 of Earth's gravity. It has an atmosphere that is mostly made up of carbon dioxide, so there's not very much oxygen. And the temperature can get really cold. And the reason that I mention the atmosphere when I talk about temperature is because the temperature on Mars fluctuates a lot more than the temperature would here on Earth because of the lack of atmosphere. It means that Mars can heat up a lot more quickly and also cool down a lot more quickly because there's nothing insulating it to really hold on to that heat over long periods of time. So during the daytime, Mars can actually get up to, if you're during the Martian summer at the equator, it can get up to about 70 degrees is the estimate that I've heard. So 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's like a nice moderate spring summer day. But that said, it dips well into the negatives during the night or during most other parts of the year. So most of the time, it's a very inhospitable temperature.
All right. Now, you mentioned the term earlier that I want to make sure we talk about, because I think over the next 2 weeks, we're going to be hearing it a lot, and that's astrobiology. You've studied astrobiology. What does that mean, and what are you looking for?
Yeah, so the term astrobiology is essentially the study of life in space. And primarily astrobiology refers to the search for life, so for extraterrestrial or alien life. And I always feel the need to put this disclaimer, I guess, on astrobiology, which is that most astrobiologists, like myself, when we're doing research and when we're looking for extraterrestrials or aliens, we're not necessarily looking for what you would consider to be like the classic alien. Exactly. We're not looking for a full-size alien that's as big as you and I and has 8 legs and has green skin and 3 eyeballs and all of that. No, we're actually, it's much more likely that when we find alien life, and I say when, not if, because I'm of the firm belief that life exists elsewhere, either within our own solar system or somewhere else. But when we do find life, especially the first time that we find it, it's very likely that it's going to be single cellular. So think more along the lines of a bacteria or a virus or something like that. And that's actually similar to what I studied in astrobiology, with single cellular life forms that have the potential to exist on the surface of Mars.
Awesome. So no little green men are going to be running in front of the camera when we see those views coming in next week.
Sadly, I mean, I can't say I won't say anything's impossible, but it's highly unlikely.
All right. Well, we've got Maine checking in, as well as at least 3 different folks from Minnesota.
Yeah, represent.
Tennessee, Peru, Washington, Bunkerville, Nevada, Indiana, New Jersey, Illinois, Kentucky, Nepal, the Philippines, Alaska tuning in, San Jose, somebody near the Armstrong Flight Research Center, as well as a whole lot of other places. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. The next question that's come in is about water on Mars. And somebody wants to know how you get water on Mars, but why is that important when you're looking for life?
Yeah, so Mars, another thing that makes Mars really difficult for life is that there isn't very much water on Mars, and a lot of it throughout the year is caught in a not very usable stage. So for instance, one of the poles on Mars is believed to have water ice on it, and there have been reports in the past of water on the surface of Mars that's very seasonal and very small amounts and such. The reason that water is so important on Mars or anywhere else in our solar system, the reason you'll always hear scientists getting really excited about finding water not on Earth, is because water, as far as we know it, is very important to life, or I should say life as we know it. So most often, it's actually one of the things that helps astrobiologists search for life, is looking for water as well, because we oftentimes say that the two don't have to necessarily, but often are found together. Where you find water, you're more likely to be able to also find life. That said, I always like to tell everyone that we don't know everything about life, and we don't know everything about life in our solar system either. And so it is always possible that we'll find life that doesn't rely on water quite as heavily as what we currently know. But as of now, it is a necessity for life.
All right, well, that leads to our next question from a student. They want to know, are there any other planets that you would like to visit besides Mars?
Yeah, so Mars is definitely my my #1 planet, and my #2 place that I would love to visit within our solar system isn't actually a planet, but instead is a moon. So I would love to visit Europa, which is one of the Galilean satellites, or one of the major moons of Jupiter. And the reason that I would love to visit Europa is because Europa is one of those places in the solar system that I mentioned that actually does have water. Europa is a moon that has believed to have, we're not entirely sure about this, but it's very, very likely that it has a subsurface ocean that's covered by a thick crust of ice. And the way that we know, or are pretty sure about this, is that every now and then water actually bursts up through the crust, the icy crust of Europa, in like geysers. And where you have water, you're very likely to find life as well. And so I think Europa is a great second choice. The reason it's my second choice instead of my first is that it's a lot farther away than Mars, and so it makes a lot more sense for us to first really get our feet under us, get our bearings for deep space exploration and travel before we try to do something that's even more difficult than going to Mars.
Nice. All right. Well, we've got England, Mexico, Lavernia Junior High, BVLS in Brooklyn, New York, Mrs. Bristol's 4th grade class in High Point, North Carolina, and Knick Elementary in Wasilla, Alaska tuning in. So thank you all so much. Abby, somebody wants to know, why does Mars have low gravity?
So the reason that Mars has low gravity, Mars actually has about 1/3 of the gravity than Earth does. And the reason for that is simply because Mars is smaller than Earth, similar to how the moon has about 1/6 of Earth's gravity. And it's, again, merely a matter of size, that the amount of matter forming the planet is directly related to the gravitational pull that it exerts on objects on its surface. So Mars is much smaller than Earth, but not quite as small as the moon, and has that nice in-between point for gravity.
Nice. All right. Somebody wants to know what you think about the book and the movie The Martian. They've heard that it was popular at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. What were your thoughts on it?
Absolutely. I love The Martian. I loved the book and I loved the movie. And I think that that's special because, let's be honest, it's an unusual thing for you to be able to love a movie that's made after a book or a book that's made after a movie. Like, usually they don't get them quite as good as they did with The Martian. I thought it was a fantastic movie, fantastic book. I really enjoyed the narrative behind it. I enjoyed how realistic, and I think that's part of why it was so popular at JPL, is that it's a really fun one for people in the space industry to watch or to read, because there's so much to it. There's some artistic license, obviously, and it is still science fiction, but there's also a lot of science fact in The Martian, and that makes it really exciting to read or to watch because it helps you to imagine what our future in the near future, I'm talking my generation, people who are alive and growing up right now, our generation, what it could look like within our lifetime. So I love that part of The Martian. One thing that I will say that I don't quite love as much is that I oftentimes get people, when I say now that I want to be the first astronaut on Mars, I get people saying, Mark Watney's already done it. He's already been there.
And speaking of that generation gap, Abby made everybody on our team feel really old this morning when she didn't know who Mr. T was. So if you know who Mr. T is, let us know down in the comments section, and we'll fill Abby in later on that. But
I was guilty of that.
We've got a question from Mrs. Alvarado's class. Which subject helped you prepare or helped you the most to continue to reach your goals?
That's a really great question, and I think that the subject in school that definitely helped me to reach my goals and to prepare for this the most was probably, I have to go with science on this one, and in particular biology, because I ended up getting my university degree in biology, and now I work as a biologist. Currently, I'm working at Harvard Medical School. That picture is from when I worked in the Mars lab, and we were actually doing some testing as well on simulated Martian regoliths. So that's what we call Martian soils that don't have, as far as we're aware, organic material in them. So I have to say that biology was probably the most helpful subject, but very, very close to it was engineering. And I got to take a really special class when I was in high school that was a mixed engineering and arts class that focused specifically on trying to interweave art and engineering in a way that I think is really a natural progression for both of those fields, because it's not just STEM, it's not just science, tech, engineering, and math, but it's STEAM, this idea that the arts are an integral part of everything that we do in science and in engineering, and that we really can't do it to the best of its potential without including art.
Working on STEM in 30 over the last few years, we've seen how that art and science intersect, and so many talented musicians are good at math and vice versa. So if you love art, that does not mean you can't love science either. You can absolutely do both.
Absolutely. And one thing that I would jump in there to mention as well, Marty, is that if you love art and you also love space and are hoping to have a career in the space industry, that is fantastic. And oftentimes when we think about the space industry, and careers in the space industry, we think about astronaut, mathematician, astrophysicist, electrical or chemical engineer, these kinds of things. But the reality of the matter is that there are tens of thousands of people and countless different types of jobs that are involved in the space industry and that are all necessary to make every single mission a success. And a lot of those jobs actually include arts and include really roles that you might not have thought about, that there are so many artists and so many communicators and educators and all of these other people involved in space exploration. So there's really a career for everyone in space.
And as a matter of fact, a question came in about watching the Perseverance rover land on Mars live. That's going to happen a week from today, about 3:30 Eastern. As a matter of fact, we will be live on NASA TV at 1 o'clock. You can tune in on NASA TV or right here on the STEM in 30 or Air and Space Facebook pages to watch that. We will do an hour-long show with Mariah Baker and John Grant, who are giant experts on Mars. So tune in to ask those questions. But as you watch the NASA coverage that starts at about 2:15 next week, you will see animations and graphics and these amazing artworks that are done by folks working for NASA. So if you're into art, there is absolutely a job there for you. So we hope that you can tune in next week as we talk about the rover landing on What's New in Aerospace, but it'll be right here also on NASA TV. Abby, the next question that's come in is from Lafayette, Indiana, and they say they're in the backyard of the astronaut nursery, Purdue University. They're going to be working on building habitats for future human missions to Mars. When do you predict that could happen, and should the 7th graders start planning their careers now?
So that's fantastic. Purdue absolutely has produced so many incredible, not just astronauts, but also other incredible technologies for the space industry and for space exploration. It's such an incredible place. And I'm excited to hear that this question is being asked. Now, I can't predict the future per se, otherwise I'd be a millionaire by now. But what I can say is that I think it's very reasonable. I think that it is not too far out to say that we could be landing humans on Mars in the 2030s. And hopefully I'll be one of them. And hopefully some of those 7th graders will also, I think that that's truly anyone who's growing up right now is a perfect age to be a part of this next segment of space exploration, this next great big step that we're taking into our solar system. And I really think that you are never too young to start planning your career, working towards your career. One of the things that I've had asked before is, because this is something that I talk about all the time, that you're never too young to start chasing a dream. And sometimes people ask me, but then what if my dream changes? Or what if my career trajectory or career path changes and I've already put all this work in? And my answer to that is, and this is why I think it's so important to not limit yourself because of your age, is that the work that you've put in will still stand. It'll still be work that will build towards your future. It'll still be helpful. It'll still be experiences that help you to grow and improve in all your skill sets. And I honestly think that anything that you start doing now will build towards something in your future, even if it's not quite the future that you were intending when you first started. So 7th grade, not too early. I would give it a double thumbs up.
And Abby, if somebody wanted to learn more about your advice on, I don't know, dreaming big, how might they be able to do that?
Thank you for the fantastic plug there. Absolutely. So I actually just wrote and published a book that came out just a couple weeks ago. I published it with Penguin Random House Publishers. It's called Dream Big, How to Reach for Your Stars. And it's a really fantastic guidebook for anyone with a dream. It has all kinds of information, anecdotes from my own life, really inspiring mini biographies of people who have achieved great things. It has lots of skills and tools that it'll teach the reader to help them achieve their own dreams, activities to help them actually practice those skills and tools and make sure that they've got them down solid. It has really fantastic and beautiful artwork by a wonderful artist, Sarah, who I got to work with. And I think that all around it is a really, really cool, really great resource for anyone. It's available wherever you buy books, whether that's online or from bookstores. I would encourage everyone to give your local small bookshop a call and ask them if they have some copies in stock.
Cool. I can't wait to get my own copy. Now, we've got another question that's come in. It's a little bit of a long one, but I think it leads to something really interesting. Somebody commented, I read last year in an article that NASA is developing a pizza to take to Mars. That's a lot of pizzas, and it takes 9 months to get there, and it won't be an overnight trip and a long time to get home. How is that possible? How are we going to take pizza to Mars?
Sadly, I have to say that I'm not personally familiar with the pizza portion of this, which is especially sad considering that it was National Pizza Day just a couple days ago. But what I can say is that as far as food goes for Mars, this is one of those challenges that makes Mars really difficult and makes it different from anything that we've ever done before, because to get to Mars, it takes about 6 to 8 months and the same amount of time to get back. And that's not even considering that the astronauts probably will want to spend a little bit of time on the surface after such a long and arduous journey to get there. And that means that we're going to have astronauts in space for much longer periods of time than we have before. And when you're in space for that long, you have to consider not just how food tastes, or not just how food nourishes your body, but also how it tastes, how it feels, all of those things, because astronauts can start to get something called menu fatigue, where if they're eating things that aren't interesting enough, it can affect their mental health as well. And so growing food in space is a really important step for future Mars missions, so that we can ensure that astronauts who are both going to Mars, staying on the surface potentially, and coming back will be able to have nutritious, freshly grown food to supplement whatever kinds of shelf-stable stocks they would bring with them. So who knows, as far as pizza goes, that one might be a little difficult. You'll have to bring a lot of shelf-stable items to make it, but hopefully you'll be able to put a little bit of freshly space-grown basil or tomatoes on top.
Awesome. Well, we've got 5th and 6th graders from Shore Christian Academy in Exmoor, Virginia, 1st graders at CFIE in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and Wilson Middle School in Appleton, Wisconsin, all tuning in. Thank you all so much. Let us know what questions you have down in the comments section. From Mrs. Sebastian's 5th grade class in Hillsboro, Oregon, what is Perseverance's main job going to be?
Yeah, so Perseverance has a lot of things that it's going to be doing. I would say that one of the main reasons for Perseverance is actually for the search for past life that might have existed on Mars. So for example, Perseverance has a lot of equipment on it, but one of the pieces of equipment that's really important is called SHERLOC, which stands for Scanning Habitable Environments with Raman and Luminescence for Organics and Chemicals. Essentially, it's a long name for a spectrometer that allows the scientists who will be receiving that data to search for signs of past life, which is really an incredible thing to be looking for. Perseverance is also going to be bringing with it a whole slew of other equipment, such as the most sophisticated cameras we've ever had on Mars, things like RIMFAX, which is a subsurface experiment that will help to further understand the geology of Mars, something called MOXIE, which is the Mars Oxygen In Situ Resource Utilization Experiment, which essentially is this idea that we could maybe take carbon dioxide that exists on Mars already, and from it, we could produce or isolate oxygen and then possibly use that as rocket fuel to return back to Earth. So those are all really cool things, just a couple of the instruments that Perseverance will have. Another really, really cool thing that Perseverance is bringing with it as kind of like a secondary, an Easter egg, let's say, for the rover, is that it's also bringing the very first helicopter ever to be flown on Mars, called Ingenuity. And the reason that Ingenuity is so exciting is because, as you can imagine, flying on Mars is kind of a difficult thing, seeing as it doesn't really have very much atmosphere, about 1% of the atmosphere that Earth has, which means that producing flight is really difficult. Ingenuity, this first ever helicopter, is a proof of concept to be able to show that flight could work on Mars and to start testing how we could make that possible. And in the future, who knows, maybe we'll be able to get to places that we never thought we could have on Mars because the terrain was too difficult or for reasons like that. And instead, we can use this as a scout and a probe to get data and images and things like that from those hard to reach portions.
Awesome. Well, I just got a note that we've got Hawaii tuning in today as well. So thanks for joining us there. We've got all kinds of questions coming in. Somebody wants to know, 4th grade class wants to know, how would we build shelters or homes on Mars?
There's a lot of ideas out there. And so far as I'm aware, there hasn't been any consensus that's been made on the absolute way that we're going to do that. It might be that we build shelters on the surface of Mars that use various different kinds of insulation to protect from radiation. And that's kind of what you saw in something like The Martian. And that's usually the most popular way that we think that we'd be doing this, is probably doing a surface type thing. But an idea that's out there that I think could happen further down the road in the future is this idea of potentially even subterranean in the future. And instead of saying, let's bring all of this radiation shielding with us, let's use the radiation shielding that already exists on Mars by doing subterranean exploration and such, and using that layer of Martian regolith as your radiation shielding. That said, I think that is an idea that is probably a lot farther out in the future. I definitely think that first and for a while, the type of habitats that we'll have on the surface of Mars will be just that, on the surface. But it's fun to think about what the further out future could look like.
I've seen some of the science fiction movies when they go into caves on asteroids or other planets.
It never ends well, right?
Turn out very well. Okay, Slade wants to know, will we need a space station on the moon to launch to Mars?
So that's the current idea, is to have the moon as this kind of gateway and this stepping stone to Mars. It's a question where it comes down to the word need. We don't need a space station around the moon or a habitat on the moon in order to launch to Mars, but it does help us to have both that area as a testing ground. And that's one of the big purposes for that, is to have a testing ground where we're testing technology, we're looking at proof of concept, we're doing all of this stuff that helps us to gain more understanding and a better level of footing in what it takes to habitate things and places that are off of Earth. And so that's a really great reason to have that initial return to the moon, the Artemis missions. And then there's also the potential that, who knows, we might even do our launches from the moon instead then to go to Mars.
Nice. Well, we've got an aspiring astronaut who wants to know if you've gone on any of the practice equipment.
Yeah. So as far as practice equipment goes, I'm assuming you mean things like the mat, which is a multi-axis trainer. That's one of the things that you see where you're basically sitting in a chair and you've got big circles around you and it can flip you in all different directions. I have gotten to do that one. I've also gotten to do a little bit of microgravity during flight training, because if you do parabolas, you can get microgravity, and the types of airplanes I fly in, you can only get a couple seconds at a time. But even that is very cool, very fun. So those are some of the types of equipment that I've gotten to do for that. Alternatively, another really interesting way and really fun way to simulate microgravity here on Earth is also through scuba diving. It turns out that the neutral buoyancy that you gain through scuba diving and in underwater is one of the best ways that we can actually simulate what it's like to live and work in microgravity without actually attaining microgravity. So that's something that I've done a lot of. And hopefully someday I'll get into the big training tank at NASA.
And I got a chance to go on a microgravity flight several years ago when I was teaching. And one of the cool things on that flight is they fly the airplane in parabolas, so there's math involved in it. But to get you ready, they fly a few that are not completely microgravity. You get to experience what it would be like to be on Mars. And I can remember doing these one-armed push-ups. And like, I am ready for Mars.
Yeah, exactly. You'd be an Olympian once you get to Mars. Like, yeah. Highest jump, longest jump, most push-ups, all of that for sure.
All right, the Craven kids want to know what kind of things will be done to prevent pollution and leaving no trace while on a Mars mission.
That's a really, really great question, because it comes down to this idea of something that we all hope that we end up doing, which is the only memories we should be taking with us are pictures. And when it comes to Mars, it is something that you have to be careful about. One of the things that I can say is that it's unlikely that we're going to leave that much pollution on Mars, because you have to think of it in terms of how much we can actually launch from Earth. It's very expensive and it's very difficult to launch things from Earth. And therefore, the amount of actual material that we would ever get to Mars and then leave on the surface or in orbit is minuscule compared to the size of the planet and everything. So that's not as much of an issue. As far as contaminating the planet with microbes or something like that, there are people who specialize in this, and I would always defer to their judgment on this, but there are whole portions of space missions that have people who that's their job, is to make sure that we are participating in planetary protection and make sure that we're not leaving anything behind that we don't mean to leave behind, which is really fantastic that we're thinking about those things ahead of time.
One of the facts that always blows my mind is right now, as far as we know, Mars is the only planet completely inhabited by robots.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it's so incredible because we're about to put a couple more of them on the surface. which is just like, what a cool time to be alive.
Yep. All right. We've got a lot more questions. We got a few more minutes left. So let us know what questions you have down in the comments section. We've got Amanda from Georgia wants to know, what is your favorite thing about Mars? She loves that it is red.
I love that too. And that's one of the things that first drew my eye to Mars when I was a little kid, and when I was really getting exposed to space exploration through astronomy and through looking up at the night sky, is that Mars is so beautiful to look at. It has that slightly reddish color to it, even with the naked eye, which is really incredible to look at. So I agree with you. It is very cool that Mars is red. That's why I wear a red flight suit, is to represent my goal of my dream of walking on Mars. I have to go, as an astrobiologist, I have to go with the fact that Mars might have, in the past or present or in the future, it really has the potential to host life. And I think that that's incredible. And so to have this place that is within our capability to reach within our lifetime, that also has the potential to host extraterrestrial life, that is hands down my favorite thing about Mars.
And that leads to our next question. Javian asks, is the soil on Mars good for growing plants?
That is a good question. So the soil on Mars would have to be supplemented in some ways in order to grow plants. And one of the reasons for that is that plants, the way that they grow, I know that it seems simple to grow plants, but it's actually a really, really complex thing that requires not just certain amounts of minerals and certain types of soils and all of that, but it also requires symbiosis with living creatures. So different types of viruses and bacterias, and even mycorrhizoids, fungi, and stuff like that, that are all within the soil and that contribute to plant growth and to healthy plant growth. And so it's really important to have those if you're going to be growing anything. And so for that reason alone, I would say that on its own, Martian soil is not the best, but it could be supplemented to be possible to grow plants on Mars. And once again, another thing to think about here is that Martian soil, or Martian regolith, as we generally call it, it's not homogeneous. It's not the same all over the entire planet. And so the types of minerals, the quantities, the type of regolith, the grain size of it, all of those different things that describe a soil or a regolith, those will change from area to area of Mars. And so there might be areas of Mars that are much more appropriate for, once you supplement it, then growing crops on. And there might be areas that are, still not quite great.
Awesome. Well, we're just about out of time, but we've got homeschoolers in Pennsylvania, future astronauts in Mrs. Manchester's second grade in Jackson, North Carolina. They wanted to shout out. So hello, thank you for tuning in. And Abby, I've got one more question for you. Today is International Day of Women and Girls in Science. We've got a ton of students tuning in. What advice do you have for those aspiring astronauts that want to follow in your footsteps and maybe try to become an astronaut one day?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I have two pieces of advice that I would love to pass on to anyone who's watching who aspires to maybe be an astronaut someday in the future, or anyone who has any dream at all. I think these are really applicable pieces of advice. The first one is to expect failure. And I think that when I say that, it at first comes across a little bit negative, but here's what I mean by that. I fully believe in your ability to achieve your big dream, but in order to achieve your dream, whether it's going to space or anything else, in order to achieve that, you have to get used to the idea of failing along the way. If you look at failure as the end of the road for your dream, then that's all it will be. But the reality is that we all fail along the way towards our dreams. And the bigger that our dream is, the more often that we're going to fail, and the more it's probably going to hurt when we do. And so you need to be ready for that. You need to know that it's okay to fail, and that failure is actually a really important and normal part of life, and a part of STEM fields and STEM subjects. And so when you run into a failure, it helps to be prepared and to know that it's okay. It's not the end. That's actually a stepping stone and an important part of actually reaching your dream in the future. The second piece of advice that I would have for anyone with a big dream is to surround themselves with people who believe in them, and people who are willing to be your cheerleaders and your mentors, and really be in your corner, and to try and find those people who want you to succeed and who want to help you reach towards those dreams. I think that they'll be really important and really helpful in a lot of ways. And for instance, I've known Marty for a while now, and he's always been a great supporter of my dreams. And he's someone that I feel really lucky to have in my corner for sure.
It's been really fun, Abby, because we met a long time ago. You came by the museum and we did a little bit of filming with you, and then we did an entire episode about Mars, and we're like, who should we get on this? And it was women paving the way to Mars. And Abby came to the museum and we had so much fun, and getting a chance to hear your story has been truly inspirational. Just to see, we follow Abby on social media, and it's like, oh, she jumped out of an airplane today. Oh, she's in a lab today. Wait a minute. Oh, she's scuba diving. And that's been a lot of fun to follow that journey. So if you're not already, follow Abby on social media. And in the comments section, I have a challenge for you. Abby wants to be the first person to step foot on Mars. And we know that when humans first landed on the moon, we had a range of first words, from the one small step that Neil said, Buzz Aldrin said, magnificent desolation. Somebody else said, yippee! What would your first words on the red planet be? Let us know down in the comments section. And before we leave today, we have a couple of things that we want to share with you. STEM in 30 just released our latest episode focused all on Mars. In it, you will meet planetary scientists and engineers working on the Mars rover. You will also meet some amazing students and learn how you can participate at home with great hands-on experiments. We will put a link for that show down in the comments section. The National Air and Space Museum and Smithsonian Enterprises is also launching a limited-time online store featuring merchandise celebrating the landing of the Mars rover Perseverance and previous exploration of the red planet. The Mars Perseverance collection launches today and will only be available until February 21st, so don't miss out on getting these limited edition shirts, mugs, stickers, and a lot more. And then 1 week from today, the Mars 2020 rover Perseverance is landing on the red planet. We hope that you tune in at 1 o'clock for an extended live chat. You can join us right here on the STEM in 30 and Air and Space Facebook pages or on our website. You can also go to NASA TV, where we will be on there from 1 until about 2:10. And at 2:15, NASA will start their live coverage of the landing, which happens at 3:30 Eastern time. So we encourage everybody to join us next week as well. Abby, thank you so much for joining us today and for answering all of these questions. And we can't wait to see where your journey takes you in the future.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you to everyone who joined us from all around, not just the United States, but from around the world. It seems like I had an absolute blast, and I hope that everyone else did as well.
We'll see y'all next time.